Social Studies 20, the League of Nations. Before there was a United Nations, there was a League of Nations. They both tried to do the same thing. I'm not sure if either has really succeeded. League of Nations was established in 1919. It actually came out of the Treaty of Versailles, the Paris Peace Conference of 1919. Um, Led and really the thrust behind it was President Woodrow Wilson of the US. Its goal, very noble in nature, very ambitious, establish and maintain peace through collective security, through disarmament, arbitration, and negotiation. Collective security means nations working together, cooperating with each other. Disarmament means getting rid of militaries, weapons, and so on. Arbitration means negotiating uh, with a third party, settling disputes. And I think you know what negotiating means: internationalism, working together, cooperation. Its structure was kind of a two-tiered approach. There was a great power council that was the top tier of the League of Nations. So the great powers were the dominant nations at that time. Predictable: Britain, France, Italy, Japan. Russia joined in 34. America was given a seat on the Great Power Council, but they never joined. America never took their seat, even though it was Wilson's idea. They never took their seat. Congress chose to go in a different direction. The 1920s would see America retreat into what is known as isolationism. They're going to stay out of international affairs politically and economically. So that's one of the reasons why they never took their seat in the League of Nations. And that's a big deal because America leaves, they come out of World War I as the most powerful country on earth, basically. And to not have them in the League of Nations weakened it badly. And maybe that's one of the reasons why it never really worked. Beyond that, any other nation state could be a member in the General Assembly, but all of the power was within the Great Power Council. That's where true power would lie in the League of Nations. It failed, however, to maintain peace. And we're going to look at specific examples coming up in the next chapter. But the reason why it failed basically to maintain global peace was that these great powers, Britain, France, Italy, Japan, and so on, were never able to put international interests above their own national interests. In other words, Britain did what was best for Britain, and Japan did what was best for Japan. And that, I guess you could say, selfishness, that ultranationalism is what prevented international cooperation. They couldn't put themselves, they couldn't put what was best for the world ahead of what was best for themselves. And that's what doomed it to failure, at least in terms of collective security and peace. It did have some success, though, in humanitarian errors. And by that I mean it did a lot to increase the status of women and children on planet Earth, female rights, women's suffrage, and so on. It did a lot to fight child labor and labor exploitation of kids in factories and so on. It did do a lot to prevent the spread of disease, a lot of inoculations, a lot of vaccinations for diseases were done by the League of Nations. But if its primary goal was to maintain and establish peace, they didn't do a good job of it. And so actually the League of Nations will disintegrate at the end of World War II. So ultranationalism got in the way of internationalism and cooperation and doomed it to failure. And we're going to look at specific examples of each of these countries in the next few lessons.